Well, welcome to the PDP Dairy Signal. And on behalf of the professional dairy producers, we have a topic today that you're all going to want to really dive into, and something that's very important to all of us, and that is water quality ultimately in the end. We know that it's important for the regeneration of our soils and for our crops and for the next generation that we protect our waters. And today we'll be talking about how we do that, and specifically, we're going to be talking about the management of drainage systems and impact on water quality. So we have a couple of our experts here that will be walking us through that. Great session ahead. Before I get too much farther, the Dairy Signal is brought to you by professional dairy producers. We've been doing a program like this to help connect with our mission for our members and other parts of the dairy community. We want to provide them information, education, and communications that helps dairy producers and all of our sector be successful. So own this program. If you have the opportunity to ask questions, you can do it right on this platform. You'll see if you're listening live and live streaming with us, there's three little dots in the lower right-hand corner. You simply click on those dots and you can ask your question. We highly encourage you to do that. If you're listening to us in a recording and you want further information, feel free to go directly to these presenters and do follow-up information. Their contact is on within the email. And if that doesn't work for you, you come right directly to professional dairy producers. We're here because we're here to serve you, and we'll connect you to those resources. Also, we're able to bring you the Dairy Signal because of our national partners that we work with, the dairy industry. And as a fellow dairy farmer, we never walk alone. We work in a community of partnerships, and that's what helps us bring this type of programming out to you in the dairy community. We have to thank, first and foremost today, the sponsor of this specific program, which is DMI, Dairy Management Inc., which is our national checkoff program. At a time when consumers are probably as far away from where milk is made, as far as the understanding, in some cases, 5 generations away from it, it's important that we have partners in our business as dairy farmers that are watching out for communicating directly to the consumer and being able to be that conduit of information. That's what you can count on your national checkoff program to be doing. So wherever you are, the connection that we have in our brand is the consumer. It is dairy is our brand, and DMI is what helps us promote and to grow consumer confidence in what we do. Without any more delay, I'm going to turn it over to two great speakers that we have. We have Laura Palata, which I am terrible with last names, so I'm going to have both of them introduce themselves, but tell us a little bit about yourself. And then also Izzy McAnee. And Izzy is with us. She actually has a PhD in this area of outreach, and both of them serve as an agriculture water quality outreach specialist with UW-Madison Extension. And what a great extension system we do have here in Wisconsin, though we have listeners and members across this great community of dairy from coast to coast. The information we're going to be presenting today is germane no matter where you go. If you have cows, you have nutrients, you have soil, and you have drainage systems, the information we're about to provide will be important to all of you. So Laura, you go first. Tell us about yourself and what you're most eager to share here on the Dairy Signal.
Great, thanks, Shelley. Yeah, so my name is Laura Paletta. I am, as you said, one of the outreach specialists within the Ag Water Quality Program. Those of you that are able to see, we have a nice little map here. There are 5 outreach specialists in our program, and we're scattered throughout the state. I cover the eastern side of the state, kind of northeast, based out of Green Bay. So my, I guess, more expertise because being in this region, there's a lot of dairy, a lot of manure use. I also know a lot about the shallow bedrock that's in this area and tile drainage, which we're talking about today. I'm here with me is another one of our specialists, Izzy. Izzy, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Laura. My name is Izzy McNamee, and I just started as an outreach specialist with the Ag Water team in February. I have a background in soil science and agronomy, and received my degrees from UW-Madison. And I'm based out of the Madison area, so I'm the outreach specialist for Southern Wisconsin. And I have my expertise are more in nitrate leaching and soil physics and soil water, how water moves in soil. So, really important when we're talking about drainage systems and tile drainage, which we're going to get into today.
Okay.
Uh,
When we look at the layout of where dairy cows and crops are grown, and we look at the Midwest in general, we have been able to really work in harmony with our diverse landscapes because we learned how to put in drainage tiles and work with the flow of water. But with that, it doesn't come, as Laura says, without some challenge because we do have such a diverse. We've got the Coulee region here in Wisconsin, which never saw glaciers. And then we have these heavy loam soils. And then we get over to the Kettle Moraine area. And then obviously some of our more shallower soils in the Northeast. So as we think about drain tile, as both an opportunity, but we also have to watch out about it. What is the new research and new information that we're about to learn? I'm going to have you guys just jump into it and take the wheel.
Sure. Yeah, I would also like to have a shout out to the Discovery Farms team. So, our Ag Water Quality Program and Discovery Farms work really closely together. And the data that Izzy will be talking about comes directly from Discovery Farms. They do on farm research, they do a lot of edge of field monitoring. So, the data we'll share is from Discovery Farms on tiled systems. So, they have collected at the edge of the field from the tile what is flowing out of the tile, and they can compare that to what is flowing from the surface and compare nutrient losses. So to get right into it, we find that in tiled systems, nitrates can be increased when you have tile in the system. So again, just a kind of a shout out to Discovery Farms. Their team is as listed here, and we can get information to anybody who is curious about more details from Discovery Farms. And with that, Izzy's going to take kind of the first part of this presentation. Izzy, I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks, Laura. So I just wanted to step back a quick moment and talk about what tile drainage actually is. Many of you are probably familiar, but tile drainage is when you install a drainage pipe, essentially, usually it's typically 3 feet below the soil surface. And that pipe will sort of catch and increase the infiltration of gravitational water that will move through the soil profile, be collected in that pipe. And then, as Laura mentioned, that pipe is going to travel through the soil and has an outflow somewhere. So sometimes that's into a ditch, or it could be another stream, or some of the conservation practices we're going to talk about in a minute. But so overall, these pipes used to be made out of clay. But now, today, they're made out of corrugated plastic tubing. And so I've included a photo here on the left, but it's probably the type of tube that a lot of you have seen in the past. And so you also, we can see in the image, for those of you listening, that there is a larger amount of soil profile that having a tile drainage system installed allows for. So this is going to decrease the wetness that you may be experiencing in your field. It's going to drain out that soil water. It may reduce your yield variability. And because there's less surface runoff happening, it can decrease erosion. This also, like I mentioned really briefly, farmers can then implement practices earlier in the season because your soils are dried out more quickly where they may have been a bit waterlogged before. Next slide, please. So where is tile installed? We're going to get to that for Wisconsin, but historically it's been installed in all sorts of patterns. And you can see, or on the left here, there's an aerial image showing, you can see the light spots, these light lines that show the pattern of tile drainage in this field. What we see more today going in is a grid pattern. That's on the right. It just looks like a grid. And this is more for farmers as insurance. So as a wet year comes and we're seeing increasing intensity of rain events, farmers can know, in case it's super wet, I have the most amount of tile I possibly could have in my field. Next slide, please, Laura. When we talk about where tile is in the US, I'm showing a map from the 2022 agriculture census, and it shows the percent of subsurface tile drainage in each county. And we see these really big hotspots in southern Minnesota, in Iowa, into Illinois. And there relatively doesn't look like there's so much happening in Wisconsin, but you can see that on the eastern side of the state, there's definitely some tile that's been installed. And these are where a lot of the more clayey soils are located that are going to be, hold on to that water more and be wetter. So it makes sense that we're seeing them there. Another thing to think about here is that we actually think that this map underrepresents the amount of tile that we have in Wisconsin. So we've heard anecdotally from a lot of farmers and places that there is more tile installed. And when tile was installed decades ago, there wasn't a requirement to report that it was being installed. So we may not have a record of it. But someone on our team recently heard from a tile installer near Marshfield, so Marathon and Wood counties, kind of in the center of Wisconsin, and is showing up on this map as having 0 to 5% of the county as being tile drained. This tile installer noted that they installed at least 2,000 miles of tile just last year alone. So tile is happening, and that's why we want to talk about it here today. And so with all this tile happening on the Wisconsin landscape, we're interested in how does this affect nutrient movement? So we have more infiltration and water movement into the soil profile. How are these nutrients moving, and what do we need to think about when it comes to water quality? And this is where I'm going to share with you some of the Discovery Farms data that Laura mentioned. Here you can see an edge of surface monitoring plot. And so this has a flume that collects surface water as it comes off of a designated agricultural area. And they are measuring how many days, they're measuring the amount of water that comes off as surface runoff, but also how many days they're seeing any sort of flow happening of surface runoff. And so the median number of days across many Discovery Farms sites that they saw was 8. So 8 out of your entire year, on average, we're seeing some surface runoff. Compared to tile, when we see those tile drains running, it was 174 days. So there's a big difference here in terms of where water is moving when we're thinking about these surface, when we're thinking about tiled and untiled systems. And so if we go to if we think about soil loss in these terms, on the left here, we have a figure of the amount of sediment loss in surface runoff, and that is averaging about 135 pounds of soil per acre. And this is again measured on these Discovery Farm sites with these edge of field instrumentations. And then in tile systems, we're seeing that the soil lost in these drainage pipes is 11 on average, 11 pounds per acre. So we don't have much sediment loss happening through the tile. So that's not as much of a concern. There is one caveat here, though, that I'm going to bring up. And you can have a tile blowout, and that will increase your sediment loss. So what happens then is there may be a weak point in the tile drain. Pressure causes the drain to rupture. Soil is drawn down into the ruptured drain. You get a void, a gap left in the soil that then creates a sinkhole. And so I'm sharing some images here of what tile blowouts can look like in the field. If you can go to the next slide, please, Laura. And so they look like these holes where we have sediment flowing out of them, or it's a gaping hole where there's a loss of sediment. And the last photo here, I'm sorry, I apologize for those of you listening to just the audio of this, but it's a piece of the plastic drainage tubing. And someone from Discovery Farms was helping fix a tile blowout, and this was the culprit that they found. And so it's this plastic tubing filled with sediment. And they found this in Northeast Wisconsin. And so you can imagine that this could be a lot of sediment running right into the river or stream or drainage outlet that you have for your system. So what does this sediment loss, potential sediment loss, mean for phosphorus? Well, phosphorus, we know it's bound to soil particles. And so if we have less surface runoff in tiled systems, we have less sediment loss generally, and that means less phosphorus loss. This is again with the asterisks that we can lose phosphorus through tile drains if we have a tile blowout. And we see this reflected in the Discovery Farms data as well. So there's higher average total phosphorus loss in surface runoff, averaging around 0.91 pounds per acre, while the phosphorus loss from tile drains was 0.08 pounds per acre. So pretty different. And so if you compare this to other states, one thing to note is that Wisconsin does tend to have more phosphorus losses in tile drains, and that's because we have a lot of manure. So if you have a long history of manure on your farm fields or on your tile drained farm fields, and maybe a soil test phosphorus level higher than about 70 parts per million, these are indicators that you might have phosphorus in your tile, and that might be something that you want to look out for. Otherwise, it's pretty uncommon to see phosphorus in your tile drainage outlet. The case changes, though, when we think about nitrogen. So the most common thing we see in tile is nitrogen moving through the system, especially in its nitrate form. We know that nitrate flows with water, and so it can be lost through surface flow. The figure that we're showing shows on average about 3.8 total tons of nitrogen 3.8 total nitrogen expressed in pounds per acre is lost from surface runoff. While when we look at tile drains, that number almost is multiplied by 5, up to about 20.5 pounds per acre of total nitrogen. And the majority of that is in the nitrate form. So nitrate is being lost as that water moves through the soil profile and into the tile drains. One thing to consider if you have tile is taking into consideration preferential flow paths, and this can increase nutrient movement in your tile drains. Here we have a cross section of like an open face of soil where you can see from the surface down into the soil profile. The top of the soil surface has had some dye applied to it, some blue dye, and that water, that dyed water has moved through, and you can see that it's kind of has filled these large macropores that are from previous earthworm activity. Soils when you have that shrinking and swelling as they dry, and then with earthworm activity too. So this is something to take into account. And the last factor that I want to mention is also if you have tile and you apply manure, it's important to think about how it moves, how that manure is moving in your system. So if you're spreading manure, first, maybe check and see if the tile lines are flowing. If they are, it's probably not a good time to spread manure. In terms of water quality. So that means that the soil is draining, and some of that manure may make it, especially if it's very liquid, may make it into those preferential flow paths, making it into the tile drainage line and then being output into our streams. So this is kind of a Goldilocks situation. If it's too wet and oversaturated, manure can be an issue. Too dry, you get more cracks for preferential flow. And then more risks if the manure is especially liquid. And lastly, we did take a look and found another study that seems relevant to Wisconsin, where they also found that nitrate losses increased in tile drainage. This is a study from Northern New York on dairy farms with manure, and they are finding the same results that we did, or that Discovery Farms did, in terms of less soil loss in tiled systems, less total phosphorus loss, but more total nitrogen loss, especially in the form of nitrate, in these tiled systems relative to surface. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk about what to do about this nitrogen loss and how to limit it.
Great, thanks, Izzy. Yeah, so Izzy showed that data from Discovery Farms, which really helped us focus in on nitrate when it comes to tiled systems. So I'm hopefully going to answer the question, what do we do about it, or how do we limit that nitrate movement? And I'm going to separate it into two different ways. So thinking about before that nitrate gets into the tile, so in-field practices. And then, eventually some of it may still reach the tile. Once it gets to the tile, what can we do about it? And using some in-field best management practices can help limit the amount of nitrate that gets into the tile. So, thinking about those 4 R's that we often talk about, really reducing your rate, giving just enough nitrogen to what the crop needs, perhaps using a split application. So you're giving that nitrogen when the crop needs it, when it can use it and pull it up, rather than just kind of sitting on the soil, vulnerable to being lost. So really just following good stewardship, good in-field practices can help limit those nitrogen losses. Cover crops are another amazing tool to use that have been found to be effective into reducing nitrates in tile. This figure here is a study from Iowa, and we're looking at in a tiled field with cover crops versus without. And you can see here, I would say on average, about 5 milligrams of nitrate lost with cover crops versus 15 without cover crops. So a significant reduction when there was a cover crop in place. And this study was in another study done in Illinois, looked more long-term, what happens long-term when cover crops are in the system versus not, again, in tiled fields. And a 5-year average found a reduction of about 31% of nitrate losses when there were cover crops in the system. So almost a third lost, a third reduction, I'll say, 30% reduction of those nitrates long term. Another thing to keep in mind when putting your tile, if you're installing tile for the first time, as he mentioned, those grid tiled systems are becoming more and more popular. Really looking at spacing those tile lines out as much as you can. So this image here shows the farther apart of those drains, your nitrate load goes down. So better spacing, more spacing can help reduce those nitrate losses. Even with a lot of great in-field practices, some nitrates still might trickle through and reach the tile. So once it has reached the tile, here I have listed, I'll go through each one, some engineered strategies that you can put at the end of your tile. So it captures the water before it reaches the outlet, before it's released into the river or stream to help take out those nitrates. So I have listed 6 here. I have them kind of listed, I don't want to say easier to harder, but I guess less infrastructure to maybe more infrastructure. So at the top of the list, I have a controlled drainage. then an open ditch system, construction wetland, a bioreactor, saturated buffer, and then recycled drainage water. So I will touch upon each one and kind of talk through it. So that first one is a controlled drainage structure. So again, this kind of goes at the end of your tile drain, and it has a board, think of a riser board at the end, so it can stop the flow and allow that water to back up and fill in the soil. So saturate that soil, and that allows the soil to do what it does best: buffer out, filter out any of those nutrients, especially the nitrate, right? That's what we're looking at. So it allows that soil to pull out the nitrates, lessening the amount of nitrates that then would eventually flow out. And that riser board, then if there's a big storm coming through, you can lower it and just, let the water flow out as need be. But, in a perfect system, good environment, the correct weather conditions, you can rise it back up, let it fill in and saturate that soil, again, allowing some of those nitrates to be pulled out. This open ditch system, again, this picture here just kind of looks like a bigger, wider ditch. So the water would flow into this ditch. And again, just allowing what soil does, allowing what plants and vegetation does, let it buffer, pull out those nitrates, more surface area for that water to flow over, and hopefully those nitrates and nutrients can get pulled out before reaching the end, maybe the stream or river. You might also have seen this two-stage ditch design. I apologize if the images are a little blurry. And this, again, it looks very similar to the open ditch, but now it has 2 steps down. Again, just increasing the surface area of the soil, of the plants, the grass, and allowing just more time to pull out those nitrates or those nutrients. Here's a constructed wetland. So again, the end of the tile would flow into this wetland, and we know wetlands are a great place that nutrients can get pulled out. Again, hopefully reducing those nitrates until eventually the water flows into the river or whatnot. Here I have a picture of a bioreactor, and this a bioreactor. For those who can see this picture, think of the tile running in at the top. So the tile running into a lot of wood chips. Typically, wood chips are what they use as a medium. Other materials could be used, but I have seen wood chips be the most common. And so the water then flows into the wood chips, becomes saturated, and microbes that then live in that environment kind of eat up those nitrates, turning that into nitrogen gas that would then just go up to the atmosphere, and the nitrate is taken out of the water for then the water then to flow to the bottom of this picture. You could think to then continue on and be discharged. So a bioreactor, I have seen a lot more being used and implemented. Discovery Farms actually just implemented one in Kewaunee County last fall. So we're very excited for this to be the first field year in use, and to hopefully collect some awesome data to see how it works and how well it performs to pull out those nitrates. So maybe next year we'll be back with some of those results. This next engineered strategy is a saturated buffer. So again, at the end of before that tile fully discharges and drains, it's kind of stopped, and instead of backing up like that control structure I first talked about, here it is kind of put through a distribution pipe and then slowly leaks out, so that you could think of it again, allowing grass and soil and plants to be a buffer, pulling out more nutrients and more nitrate before entering that stream or ditch. And again, that control structure allows you, if there is a big storm, you can kind of bypass it, and it can go straight into the stream if needed. So can allow for multiple different uses. Lastly, something neat I stumbled upon was this idea of a recycled drainage system. So instead of discharging your tile water into a stream or ditch, actually collecting it and putting it into your own pond or reservoir on your farm. So if there is very dry conditions, drought conditions, you now have a storage of water that you could then use to put on your cropland, use it as irrigation or whatnot. So again, I have listed them as what would take more infrastructure. This one would probably take a lot, but if notoriously dry, perhaps where you are, depending where you are, it could be of great use to recycle your drainage water. And there, having some more nitrogen, or if there is high nitrates in that water, maybe perhaps putting that back on your field, your crops will thank you for that boost of nitrogen throughout the season. Okay, to wrap up and leave you with some takeaway messages, drainage tile can allow earlier access to your fields. It kind of removes that access water, might let you get out there and start on your field work earlier in the season. Izzy showed that tiles don't seem to have a big impact on sediment and total phosphorus losses, but it is nitrate losses that are of concern. So really those nitrate losses can be increased with tile. I shared some good infield practices that can help reduce that nitrate from leaving the field. So those good infield management practices, perhaps using cover crops. But once it does enter the tile, there's that laundry list of engineered practices that you could also utilize once it does enter the tile, but trying to take out that nitrogen before it enters your discharge, your stream or ditch. And again, just some best management practices to keep in mind if you do have these tiled systems. When you are installing, just making sure you're installing them properly. If you're adding on lateral lines, making sure that main line can accommodate the amount of water in that watershed. Making sure you're locating outlets properly. You are remembering where your outlets are, making sure they're clear, they're free of debris, so they're working correctly. When you're installing and marking air vents. So again, just good housekeeping, good upkeep to make sure you know that your tile systems are working correctly. As he shared about those tile blowouts, making sure you're fixing those to make sure the sediment movement is kept down. You don't want all that sediment moving through your tiled lines. And overall, good record keeping. As he mentioned decades ago, we're not quite sure where all the tiled lines are, those old clay tile lines. So keeping good records can help you upkeep nicely, keep them clean, and hopefully use them for a long time. With that, I'll pass it back off to Shelly, and we do have our emails on this page too, if interested, or as Shelly mentioned, they'll be in the notes from this.
Absolutely. Excellent content here. And another plug for UW Discovery Farm and the team that you guys belong to at UW Extension. We truly believe in Wisconsin. We've been somewhat spoiled because it was the birthplace of UW Discovery Farms, and cows definitely are important to Wisconsin, but that balance of having the knowledge and the science on farm that helped us truly maintain soil health and water quality has allowed America's dairyland to continue to grow here. So hats off to both you and Laura and the whole team at UW Discovery Farm and the infrastructure that supports it through component research all the way out to on-farm research and working with our regulatory teams. Wow. So, the question that I have, and I'm going to encourage fellow dairy producers to pop in here. We talk about good record keeping. And then Izzy, you talked about the knowledge that there are a lot of old clay lines out there. How do farmers get their hands around? Maybe there aren't the records. And sometimes we can see with aerial maps, perhaps when it's really, really dry, where the tile system is, or when it's wet, where the tile system is broke. How does a farmer go about getting their hands around moving forward, both so that they can get the best yields out of the capital investment they've made, but also ensuring long-term surface and water quality throughout the system? How would you tell a farmer to start back walking through fixing an old system that they're not sure of and moving forward with a new system?
Izzy, do you want to take a stab at it first, or I don't mind?
I can chime in with a couple things, and then Laura, I'm sure you'll have more to add. But I think, yeah, like you mentioned, Shelley, the first step is identifying where they are. And so we do have some resources on our website, and some of the extension team has worked on, how you can do a patchwork of things together, from aerial images, old Google Earth images, talking to, going down to the bar and talking to somebody that has been there before, or used to farm the land. So a nice combination of those is a good way to go about it. And then observing your fields, like you said, in those different conditions. So if it is really wet and you have a tile line, you might see a drier spot. And I know a lot of farmers have drones these days. That could be one way to get that imagery. Laura, do you have anything to add?
Go ahead, Laura.
Nope, that was great. That's kind of what I was going to say. Hopefully, you have some old stories of where clay tiles might be. I know a lot of farmers that I've worked with are like, oh, I think my grandfather put one on here, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And sometimes you can find them. They're a little bit more shallow. So you might be able to hit them if you had a probe. But overall, you just hopefully moving forward, if you put them in now, just keep good records of them moving forward.
I'm willing to bet that some of the early tile lines that went in Wisconsin and Iowa probably date back to the mid 30s, early 40s.
Probably, I've seen some from the 50s, so I'm sure there's some even earlier than that.
Okay. And the records, it's going to be a little bit harder to find them. But at what point do you just move forward with a new system and they may collide with or coincide with old existing lines?
Yep, and I've seen that happen too. Usually, if a farmer does have to dig down for whatever reason, that's when they are like, "Oh, there's some old tile there," and yep, you just kind of do the best you can.
And moving on. So we talked a lot about nitrogen. Any other, is that the number one issue that we're dealing with in most cases when we're talking with the tile lines and the drainage? Or are there other nutrients or um, organic substances that we also should be monitoring?
That's what Discovery Farms has found really, just that nitrate is key. And I guess for when it comes to water quality and what we're focused on, often we focus on that phosphorus and that nitrate and sediment. So those are the big three things for water quality. And so in this case, it's that nitrate in tiled systems. That's the big kicker.
Okay. And how much does it vary across the different regions depending on the soil profile or how that soil was formed, if it's old soils or if it's glacial soils? How much of a variation do you see?
That's a great question. I don't know if I have specific numbers. Izzy, do you?
I don't, but I could hazard a guess. I don't have specific numbers, but I think you're right that when you think about soil type and how quickly, if you have high organic matter and that organic matter is mineralizing and you're getting more nitrate available in your soil, and then that's all washed out, so there are definitely different levers to the system. If you have tile drainage in a really sandy area, that's going to hold on to nitrate even less. And so then it would wash out more quickly. But it also depends on your inputs too, right? So how much are you applying in terms of fertilizer? And it's really like an in and out system. So keeping the whole picture in mind, I think, is important.
I think another great thing I just thought of is, yeah, kind of as you mentioned, like your in-field practices, and really timing is very important. Discovery Farms has found that it really only takes one or two big storms. That's what where a majority of the losses come from, both on surface and through tile. That it's like that those one or two huge storms that come in the spring or summer, that then that's what big portion of those losses are from. So if you spread manure, a couple days or the day before a big storm comes, those losses might be extremely large compared to just trickled throughout the year. So really focusing on good timing, good management practices, especially if using manure or what inputs you're using, fertilizer inputs. Just trying to limit your losses the best you can.
So if you were going to put in sequential order, and there's no such thing as the average farm or the average soil type, but the best top 3 ways to reduce the loss of nitrogen based on what we can control. We can't control the weather. Timing we can, but Mother Nature seems to love to out trick us, okay, from time to time and make it more difficult. What would be the things that you would outline would be the most predictable ways that we can manage nitrogen loss through tile? Or prevent it, I should say.
Great question. I think the right rate is extremely important. If you add too much, and then there's just going to be some extra hanging out, more than the crop can take up, more than the crop can use. And that's where it's vulnerable to being lost. And then add that with, like you said, we can't control the weather, add extra hanging out, extra nutrients hanging out, and then a big storm comes through, it can sweep them away.
Mm-hmm.
Izzy, what would you say is some big ones?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned is really important, the right rate. And I think that ties into the big one I would say is making a budget or a nitrogen balance for yourself. We have some tools that can help people do that so that you can understand how much you're putting on and how that might, change, how that balances with your yields and what is coming off of your field in terms of nitrogen, and then how much is left in the soil and might make its way to the waterways. I know that can be tricky with manure and estimating the nitrogen content of manure, but I think it's still worth giving it a shot. I had one other thing, and I can't remember what it is.
We'll give you some time. You come back, you popcorn in
Okay.
here. So
Okay.
with the nutrient balancing of things, nothing in our system is free. And the growing an acre of corn or beans or any crop right now, the margins are slim, very, 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 very slim. So that the value of that nitrogen, it's like flushing money out the end of the tile if we lose it. Is what kind of dollars and cents can go into some of that balancing so that the extra steps, the extra care does turn into that nitrogen's value into another bushel of corn or another, you know, output of cash grain or food that we can feed that we can be putting through the cows. How do we calculate that out?
Yeah, great question. And it is kind of a complex system. There's a lot of different inputs, outputs, putting a dollar sign to each of those. I wrote an article for the crops and soils team member with Extension, trying to put a dollar sign to that, especially to manure, like putting a dollar sign to the nutrients that are in manure. So I guess my plug would be to try to search on our website and find that article. Again, just answering that question, Shelley. And a great thing with then adding on the end of that is you're losing some money and you're impacting water quality as well. So, adding these great best management practices in can help save the bottom line, save some money. And also you are improving your water quality too.
Recognizing that cow manure is another great byproduct gift that cow is giving us, and it has a value. It's a natural organic that contains these essential nutrients being nitrogen. And if we have to put nitrogen on that crop, any other way, we have to purchase it. So that nitrogen from the cow is not free. It is a value to it. We certainly don't want to lose it. So the research that you guys are doing and teaching us just different watch outs, timing, rating, definitely is about keeping us more efficient and being able to grow ourselves a little bit more efficiently. What other things? This is a time of year we're just go, 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 go. But if we're listening to this right now, give me three things that you want me to think about as a dairy farmer, trying to milk every opportunity I can to put a little bit of cash in my pocket and protect the not only my water quality, but that of the next generations.
Yeah, my mind first goes to, I guess, more of the, I guess I shouldn't say basic soil health, but our first step typically from both a soil health perspective and water quality is just keeping our soil covered as best we can. Really keep it covered. We found cover crops can do an array of things. I've shared today how it can help with tile drainage and nitrate, but overall cover crops protect our soil. Perhaps a dairy farmer can harvest the cover crop in the spring to use as a supplemental feed. So playing around with cover crops, different varieties, different management with cover crops. But overall, we find keeping our soil covered, protecting it, it has some great benefits on both, across the board. Izzy, do you have other tips?
Yeah, I think this kind of ties to some of your previous questions too, Shelley, but keeping in mind the going for the maximum, getting that return on your applications in terms of water quality and also in terms of your yield. But you can work out the economics there in terms of what's actually going to make sense. And it may not mean maximizing your yield in order to maximize your profit. And so I know that our crops and soils colleagues have a lot of resources on that that we could point you to that I think could be helpful there too. So keeping that in mind when thinking about extra applications, I think is something.
As a farmer, we're in the business of feeding things. Ultimately, the end goal is to help feed our community and feed our families, but sounds like feeding our soils and managing our nutrient loss, nitrogen in this conversation, is not a whole lot different than feeding our cows. There's that balance level of maximizing production without exceeding extra dry matter intake on a cow. It sounds like it's the same thing when we're managing and talking about what's coming out of the end of the tile line. If we get the nitrogen right and we can maximize it, that's where our margin and our benefit is going to be. And this is great research that UW-Madison has done. I don't have any further questions coming in from the group right now. We want to make sure that if you're interested in getting your continuing education credits, that right after this, you take the quiz that is about today's program before you leave the platform, and you then can get your Dairy Advanced credits. For more information, I'll tell you, tap into UW Discovery Farms and certainly the research and the knowledge that we have here from Izzy and Laura. Their contact information is, if you have an opportunity to go onto the platform, it is here, or contact professional dairy producers. We will connect you directly to them. And without any further delay, we want to wish you the very best Tuesday, and we'll see you back on Thursday for the next episode of the Dairy Signal. Signing out from professional dairy producers. Thanks for what you do. We appreciate each and every one of you.